This is PIX on Politics Daily with Dan Mannarino.
Hey everybody, welcome to PIX on Politics Daily. It is Wednesday. Happy hump day to you, September 10th. And we are zeroed in on the race for mayor of New York City right now. And in fact, PIX11, Emerson College, and The Hill put out a new poll this morning, 6 a.m., and it is creating some buzz in New York City right now. Second poll of the week. Don't forget, Emerson College was probably the closest to getting it right in the primary, whether depending on which candidate you talk to. But when you look at the results, they were closest to getting it right. Let me bring in senior political reporter Henry Rosoff right now to break down some of the details of this poll. So this was interesting because it once again shows that Zohran Mamdani is far and away the front runner. But what's interesting about this poll, and some others are now doing this as well, is they look at this from a two-man race if some candidates were to drop out or coalesce around somebody else. So walk me through some of that.
Well, at this point, it'll be on the voters, first of all, to coalesce, because Curtis Lee, the Republican, says he's not dropping out. Mayor Eric Adams running as independent, not dropping out. But our polling looked at all these head-to-head matchups, and the only one who's really even in spitting distance is former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who trails by 7 percentage points. Mamdani is leading him 47-40 with 13% undecided. So by all calculations, if this was a two-person race, that's a race. I mean, that is legitimately a contest that could break either way, but that's not what we're talking about here, because in the main line of this poll, let me read the numbers to make sure I get them correctly. You have Zohran Mamdani 43%, then Cuomo at 28%, then Sliwa at 10%, then Adams at 7%, 9% undecided. So in this multi-horse race, this divided field, Mamdani is very clearly running as the strong favorite to become the next mayor of New York City.
Yeah, and that's the second poll this week. Siena College put out a poll as well that had very similar results with Zohran Mamdani with a commanding lead, right? So it's interesting because Eric Adams says, I'm absolutely not dropping out of the race. He has this press conference on Friday saying all the rumors and conjecture that are out there about a Trump administration job are false. There's rumors this week that he might meet with President Trump at a Yankee game, to be continued. Curtis Lee not bowing out. Andrew Cuomo obviously not bowing out. Jim Walden says, well, give it till October 1st.
And as you talked about with him the other day, he can't even get his name off the ballot. So remember, Dan, what we're talking about here with this head-to-head race, this is like, even if all these guys, quote-unquote, drop out, voters will still need to really plug in and not put them on their ballots, and that's not even a given.
Right, that's what I was getting at, which was just yesterday, Jim was here on our Daily Show talking about how he was going to go to the Board of Elections and say, hey, take my name off the ballot, and he was denied. So his name will be on the ballot, as will everybody else's seemingly then. And that makes it very difficult for somebody to drop out and really for a New Yorker to be in tune to that. But what's interesting about our poll, too, was it got down to some issues as well.
Yeah, I mean, so let's go through the top issues, because that was really interesting. So economy is still number one. Economy affordability is kind of number one everywhere, including New York City.
Now, I would have thought crime was number two.
Crime, well, that's what Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo would hope to from a simple policy standpoint, because Zohran Mamdani has some very different views about policing that New Yorkers do have legitimate concerns over. That being said, what's number two, and what's number two trending across the country right now, apparently, according to our pollster at Emerson, is quote-unquote threats to democracy. Particularly Democratic voters, as they explain this to me, really concerned about what they view as authoritarian tendencies of the Trump administration, particularly around how he's using ICE and how he's using the National Guard and how he's exercising his executive authority. But it's not just Democrats. It's something in the neighborhood of 10% of Republicans as well. So, I mean, just for example, in 2024, when President Trump was running for re-election, wouldn't be the right term, but his second term, there was a lot of conjecture about what voters would make of January 6, 2021 and the insurrection at the Capitol and his supporters and whatnot. And most of the polling around in 2024 around President Trump was, that's not a threat to democracy. Like, the voters had moved on. We're not worried about it. It never really broke 9-10% in any of the major polling, including ours. And now, 9 months into his term in office, and you see it as the number two issue in New York City, and according to our pollster, in many places around the country.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting, and that is a very real issue, I guess that is playing out. But like you said, Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo are saying, well, crime is the issue. Eric Adams saying, look what I did for crime. I brought the numbers down, even though if you talk to a New Yorker, they don't necessarily believe that.
Well, we polled that, Dan. I mean, the voters quite simply in New York City are not buying what the mayor is selling. If you look at the numbers, we asked, how is your safety compared to 4 years ago when the mayor was brought in? 42% said no different. 39% said they were less safe, and 19% say they're more safe. So, you have almost 80% of voters saying crime's either the same or it got worse.
Yeah, which is very interesting because when you talk to Eric Adams, he blames oftentimes the media for not telling the story accurately, right? But just last week, he came on the morning show and was there with the police commissioner to talk about crime and really tout what he says are low crime numbers. And then this comes out and it's like, well, no, people did hear the story. They just necessarily didn't believe it. They don't feel safe. And meanwhile, he comes on with the police commissioner and it's overshadowed by the fact that so many other questions are going his way about his campaign that you lose fact that and that's his problem.
Yeah.
I feel that his problem the whole time has been he's been overshadowed by so many issues over 4 years that he may have done a lot.
Well, he likes to blame the media for not, quote unquote, telling his story, but there have been so many distractions in this administration. I mean, the multiple police commissioners under investigation. One literally just referred criminal charges to the Southern District of New York, Mr. Donlin. Who knows if that'll go anywhere, but it just speaks to the fact that he has all these allies and former allies that, find themselves in trouble or have falling out with him, that has become the major story. And a lot of it is at the intersection of his leadership at the NYPD.
Yeah. And by the way, he put out a statement this morning. Well, Todd Shapiro did. His spokesperson said, don't believe the polls. And Andrew Cuomo was above the polls, and look where that ended up, and blah, blah, blah. So that was his statement in result to that. There was a very interesting question, and it has to go with Zohran Mamdani's policies, and that's about taxing the rich, right? And this is something that the governor has come out and said. She said it first here on PIX11 that she was absolutely a no on raising taxes, but people seem to be supporting it. Yeah,
2/3 of New Yorkers that we surveyed, 66% said they are in favor of a 2% tax on people that make more than $1 million each year. That is one of a two-pronged approach Mamdani is pushing to pay for his big policy proposals like universal child care and free and fast buses across the city. The other is a corporate tax. We didn't survey that. But on the wealth tax, I mean, 2/3 of New Yorkers saying, sure, go for it. The governor herself is, as we all know, is headed into an election year next year. So she's been resistant to this raise tax message, but her bread and butter in the state of New York as a Democrat is in New York City, where now we know 2/3 of the voters in New York City say, go for a wealth tax. So it'd be curious if you see movement in an election year next year from the governor on the wealth tax. Again, we didn't do surveys on the corporate tax, and that's stickier because that's employment and jobs, and we know the job market is getting stagnant right now.
Yeah, I mean, but that certainly was eye-opening for at least us political nerds to look at, saying, well, I wonder if Hochul will change her say on what exactly happens there, right? But if you're Andrew Cuomo and you're looking at this, his campaign did not respond this morning for a comment. What are they thinking now looking at this?
I mean, they're continuing to, because they did respond to the New York Times Siena poll, which had similar top-line results, as you mentioned. He called a big press conference just yesterday, and the message was more of the same. You need to back me. You need to get on my team, because a vote for anyone else is effectively a vote for Mamdani. And it is accurate analysis. I mean, I understand that he has an opinion and an agenda and whatnot, but his analysis at the end of the day is seeming more and more correct. I mean, you have 9% undecided, 10% for Sliwa, 7% for Mayor Adams, who's way underwater in popularity. He's less popular than President Trump in this poll. And we know President Trump is not popular in this town. And Cuomo is basically saying, listen, they're not coming off the ballot. Legally, they can't. But you don't have to vote for them. If you want this to be a two-man race, if you have concerns about Mamdani, vote for me. Now, I will say something else in this poll that was very interesting is that Mamdani was above water in popularity. His net approval, I think, was around 13-14%, and Cuomo was underwater, I think, by 8 or 9 percentage points. So here's the problem. Cuomo is, to put it mildly, a very imperfect candidate. We're all familiar with the scandals. We're all familiar with him resigning. So perhaps if he was a fresh face or a different alternative or something else, maybe he could make this sort of rally around me. I'm the white knight to stop Mamdani. But he can't. It's very difficult for him to make that argument.
Right. And a few political experts that we were talking to along the way were talking about how Zohran Mamdani is just untainted. He has no controversy. He has no skeletons in his closet thus far that they can pull out and say, look what he did wrong. What's interesting, it's also playing out in real time. I don't know how familiar you are with what's going on in New Mexico with universal child care that was just passed. And people are saying, well, look, I was reading a lot of viewer comments about the universal child care plan and saying, I don't mind paying more taxes if it's going to go to something like that, which is kind of what he's been saying. I mean, he's saying tax the rich for it, but it's interesting that they're going to be doing this now, and if it's going to work, it could be a model to kind of follow.
I would expect a lot of movement on this issue for one very simple reason. This is the one big promise that Governor Kathy Hochul herself has identified as, I want to work on this, right? So you would have perhaps the future mayor of New York and the governor running for re-election in alignment on a major issue and needing to prove something in an election year, not just for the governor next year, but for the Democrats in the midterms. Because we all know that if it's Mayor Mamdani in charge of New York City, he's going to be this avatar, this boogeyman for Republicans across the country. And the quickest way to put that to rest is to bring a deliverable forward. Well, universal childcare would be a really big deliverable. Free buses, or maybe just free buses in, like, say, Queens or Brooklyn would be a huge deliverable. Right. And Mamdani seems keenly aware of this. Anytime he's asked, well, is this realistic? Will you do this? Will you change? He always, when he gets backed into a corner, and you did a great job questioning him just a couple of weeks ago. And so you can speak to this. You know, when you really push and push and push and push, he says, at the end of the day, we got to deliver. That's the measurement. So we'll see if they can deliver a portion of universal child care at least.
Yeah. I mean, he seems to a lot of the items are negotiable. How much are you willing to negotiate with the governor? You know, if you want to raise taxes, does it have to be 2%? Is it, is this the threshold change? He always talks about there's room for negotiations to get it done, to your point. Another part of the poll, which is very timely, has to do with September 11th and just kind of safety and security that people feel here in New York City and around the country.
Yeah, I mean, not a good result in this poll for how Americans are feeling about their safety. We asked if people thought the federal government was better equipped to prevent major attacks like 9/11. A slight plurality at 36% said yes, better. But another 36%, a little less, like 35.5, said, it's about the same. 29% said, no, not really, or we're worse off. So, people really not feeling particularly good about our security situation. We also asked about how people were remembering and reflecting on 9/11 24 years later, about 50-50 as far as doing it in private versus doing it in public. So not a deep insight there, but it's not like people were like, I feel our government's really going to be able to protect us. There's especially after those comments Police Commissioner Tisch, made the other day, where there's perhaps targeting on the East River crossings. So there is a high level of concern right now.
Yeah, I mean, and given what's happening around the world at the same time, right?
Yeah.
So key takeaways for you as we kind of wrap up here.
I mean, it's that Mamdani pay for it. That 66% of New Yorkers, 2/3 of New Yorkers are like, tax the rich, pay for this agenda, and the favorabilities. I wouldn't. We didn't really play that up this morning as I presented the poll, but the more I reflect on that, I mean, the only one really above water is Mamdani right now, and he's winning. And you talk about, can anyone take him down? Well, all these other guys, people don't really like him at the end of the day.
Right.
That's a big problem.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was Spencer Kimball who said yesterday on another show that we were doing, national show, Political Power Ranker, that will air on Friday. He was saying, like, Cuomo seems to have this base of people that just don't, that he could get out to vote, that just don't want to. And he's like, if we could get them there, he needs to find an issue to get some of these folks who are kind of waffling out the door. What I thought was most interesting between our poll and the Siena poll yesterday was really the crime issue. On our poll, just the fact that it was a little further down. But in the Siena New York Times poll, they broke down who they thought could handle crime the best, and it was Mamdani. That is something that Eric Adams has said, look what I've done, and he was the lowest.
Well, you look at what people, it's not necessarily crime, but it's a feeling of public safety or unease when you go on the subways and deal with people who are facing very serious mental health challenges. Well, we've had 4 years of a mayor who is a former cop who's used cops to try and solve everything, and people still see that guy or gal on the subway screaming, and it doesn't seem to be improving. What Mamdani is effectively saying, I'm going to flood the subways with community response people and social workers. I think people are starting to be like, will it work? I don't know. Is it different? Yeah, it's different.
Why not try something different? It hasn't been working, right? Good stuff, Henry. Thank you for breaking all of that down. And don't forget, everybody, we have Picks on Politics this Friday. We're going one-on-one with the City Council Speaker, Adrienne Adams. We're going to be talking to her about many things, including the vetoes from the mayor, some of the City Council bills, and how the City Council is planning to override them against the mayor. Some ballot measures that they wanted to not appear on the ballot in November that now are, since they were voted on by the Board of Elections. We're going to talk to City Council Speaker Adrienne Adams about that. And, of course, the race for mayor, which she used to be a candidate for. That is this Friday on Picks and Politics. That'll do it for us on this Wednesday. I will see you back here tomorrow.